Hello, welcome to another edition of Hypnosis Helps with me, Neil Myers, hypnosis practitioner, and my colleague Bill Miller, also a hypnosis practitioner. And this is going to be a show which I've actually been looking forward to talking about this topic for a long period of time. Don't know why we haven't covered it earlier, Bill.
I know, really.
It's too busy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
And so the topic we're going to be covering today is hypnosis in relation to allergies. And I was going to make a comment about this being a good time of year in Connecticut to talk about this because of the potential seasonal allergies. But in Connecticut, we seem to be having a winter that just keeps on and on and on.
Yeah.
I'm still wearing the same clothes. We're filming this in June. And it doesn't feel like June, does it, Bill?
No, it doesn't.
No, it does not feel like June. But so we're going to be talking about allergies. We're going to be talking about environmental allergies. We're going to be talking about food allergies. And we're going to be talking about how hypnosis can help with allergies. Now, some of you out there may be saying to yourselves already, what? Allergies? Hypnosis? Surely hypnosis can't have any effect on allergies. Allergies are to do with things, reactions to things that you ingest or things in the atmosphere. But in fact, hypnosis has been demonstrated to have a very, very long history of success working with allergies. I work with allergies, and other hypnosis practitioners following similar methodologies work with allergies. So we're going to describe how hypnosis can help with allergies in this show, what the basis is scientifically, things we know, things we don't know, and we're going to be talking about all sorts of allergies today. So if you suffer from allergies, or you know somebody who does suffer from allergies, pay attention because this information is going to be relevant to you. And just before we talk about the allergies, Bill, one of the comments that I wanted to just observe before we start, and I don't know if you agree with this, or as we start, is that allergies in general seem to be on the increase, on the rise.
They do. I keep hearing that, in different media and so forth.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things, I have two school-aged children, and one of the extraordinary things to me is certain restrictions that are placed on them. For example, my children are not allowed to, or they're allowed to, but if they take something with peanut butter in it, or anything with peanuts, like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, sometimes in groups, they're going to be asked to sit separate from the group because they're so concerned about the number of children who at the present time seem to have allergies to peanuts.
And it's funny because that's the one I've heard about that seems to be, a lot more prevalent.
Right.
If you think about it, when I was growing up, peanut butter and jelly sandwich was like a staple.
Right.
So many kids had them
Right.
in school, and there wasn't any problems.
Right, and then I regularly now, when I take my children to groups where there are other children, there seem to be children who are allergic to all sorts of things, gluten, fish, various fruits and vegetables, cheese, dairy products.
Right.
There seems to be an enormous proliferation, and again, maybe it's just because I'm getting old, but I don't seem to remember at school this at all. In fact, I actually can't think of one incident from school of anybody that had allergies beyond seasonal hay fever allergies and things like that.
Right.
So food allergies are very, very common. Now, in the nature of things, there have been a number of theories and as to why this may be the case. And there are lots of them. Some people say it's changes in our environment. Some people say it's changes in the way our food is processed. Some people even argue that the increase in the frequency and the earliness of vaccination changes the immune system and changes the response. Some people are even talking about electronic pollution causing it. And there's all sorts of things that are there. And on this show, we're not going to be debating all the different theories and postulates as to why allergies are on the increase. What we're going to be doing is talking about how hypnosis specifically can help some of those allergies and the way in which it works. So we're going to sidestep all of those theoretical debates simply because if you or people that you know suffer from allergies, you don't really care why you have them in a way. You just want to get relief from them in some shape or form. And that's what we're going to be talking about.
And one of the things that I want to say from the start, as you know, I spent my career, 36 years, in the pharmaceutical industry in developing drugs. So I know a lot about drug development and things like this. And being a scientist, I'm a natural skeptic of things. And then I move into the hypnosis realm here, and you originally because you originally taught me, and you start talking to me about allergies, and I thought, oh, come on. And so I'm a big skeptic, and there's a lot that's not known, and there's certain theories we're going to talk about with hypnotists. Maybe I buy some of them, maybe I don't. But in the end, the real question to me is, you've got a problem, you've got an allergy,
right,
and you do something with hypnosis, does
right.
it get better or doesn't it?
Right.
And that's really, that's the proof of the pudding is, does it get better?
Right.
And actually, if you think about it, it's the same thing that actually I faced in the pharmaceutical industry. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of drugs, we have no idea how they work, mm-hmm. okay? But we know when we give, a person has got a condition, and maybe it's an allergy, and we give them a drug, they get better.
Right.
And that's really the proof. And actually, that's all we really have to do to get a drug approved. You have to show that it works, right. It has benefits, and you have to make sure it doesn't have a lot of risks, and that basically the benefits outweigh the risks.
Right. And so, one of the differences, I don't have to tell you, but for the edification of the viewers, of course, is that with almost any medication, there are always side effects. There are always something.
Always.
And one's always looking to see whether the benefits that the drug confers outweighs the detriments of whatever side effects may be produced. And everybody who's heard a drug advertised, of course, knows that the drug companies are obligated to talk about potential side effects.
Right.
One of the nice things about hypnosis is there are really no side effects.
Right.
And so in terms of an allergy, what that means is that if we work with somebody that is showing allergic responses and it changes, not only are there not going to be side effects, but we found a distinct, measurable, observable change that is beneficial to that individual.
Right. And one thing I do want to say, just to be very clear, this is our legal disclaimer here, right? If we had somebody come to us that had life-threatening asthma,
right,
closing off their airway,
right,
first thing we would ask is, have you been to see a doctor? Mm-hmm. And we would make sure that they're under the care of a doctor and so forth. Because, we like doctors, we don't want to do any harm,
right.
And we have to make sure that that's really been looked at first.
Absolutely, and that's a really good point, Bill. And again, we can't emphasise that too frequently. We're not doctors. We don't claim to be doctors.
Right.
We respect the work of doctors, and we know that always we're very cautious in ensuring that people, when they come to us, as they sometimes do for very serious conditions, that medical personnel are aware of it and know.
Right.
Fortunately, let me adjust my glasses there. Fortunately, people tend to come to us as hypnosis practitioners after they've exhausted
right.
other more conventional approaches, even more, for want of a better word, conventional complementary or alternative approaches.
Right.
Because for most people, and this is a good topic for this, the mental leap that hypnosis can even be at all effective with something which seems to be so purely chemical, environmental as an allergy is a very big leap indeed. And this
right.
is one of the reasons why I think
right.
this show is a very, very important one, because it indicates an area where we can be very, very, very effective and helpful given certain conditions, where people really don't know that it's even possible.
Right, exactly. So yeah, it's anyway, so let's start out with a definition of allergy.
Okay.
So we
always a good place to start.
Yeah, getting our grounding there. So I'm going to look a little bit at my notes here because it's
sure.
a complicated subject. This allergy definition comes from the EAACI, which is the European Academy of Allergy and Clinical Immunology. I wanted to get a real authoritative source, with doctors, Western medicine. This is
sure.
really well grounded.
Okay.
So basically, your immune system is there to protect you from harmful invaders. Okay, right. Cold, viruses, bacteria, and so forth. And the thing is, the funny part about a lot of this is what we think of as the cold, the symptoms, the runny nose, the watery eyes, is actually not the virus itself. It's our body trying to get rid of the virus.
Right.
Okay, and you'll see similar things if you get food poisoning, you'll see emesis.
Right.
That's your body's reacting, saying, "Oh, that's something bad. Let's get it out of here."
Yeah, you vomit.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So the thing is that it's the same thing with the allergies, a hay fever. It's trying to wash the pollen away.
Right.
So now the thing is that, so a lot of these diseases, it sees a harmful invader.
Right.
The invader is harmful,
Yes.
and it's trying to get rid of it.
Okay.
Now the allergy, what it really is, it's the same thing. Allergic response is the same thing as what it does for a cold, but what it's doing is it's misidentifying something as being harmful when it's not.
Right.
Okay, so a pollen grain isn't going to hurt you. Okay, but your body misidentifies it and says, "Oh, that must be harmful," and it kicks off the same kind of reactions as maybe when you have a cold.
So would it be fair to describe it as a mistake made by the immune system?
Right. It's a mistake, and they even, their words from the EAACI is actually, it's a abnormal reaction to a harmless substance. Okay? So, like you say, and they actually use that word, it's a mistake of the immune system. Okay?
Right.
So now, and it's just trying to get rid of the causative agent. Now, what we'll call those things, the pollen grains, we're going to get a little technical here for a second.
Sure.
That's an allergen. Okay? And so what happens is your body senses that. Now, there's actually two phases of an allergic response. There's the sensitization phase, and then there's the symptomatic phase.
Okay.
So now, when you first start experiencing, take pollen as the example.
Yeah.
When you first start getting it into your nose and your system, your immune system begins to react. Okay, it reacts against that allergen, that pollen,
Right.
and it produces antibodies.
Right.
Okay. Now, at that stage, you actually don't have any symptoms. Okay. Now, what actually happens next, though, is the symptomatic phase.
In this phase one, there's an allergic response, but there's no symptomology at that point.
Right. So the allergic response is formation of antibodies and things
Got
like
you.
that.
Okay.
But you're right. There is no symptoms at that point.
Okay.
Well, now as you get exposed more and more and more, you get more sensitized till you get to the point where you get a symptomatic phase. Now, we'll get technical here. There's these things called mast cells, and I believe they're in the lining of your nose and things like this. What actually happens, and they contain substances like antihistamines, but they're contained within them. Now, what actually happens is on the surface of these cells, there's these antibodies that your body has formed. They're like little key locks, right?
Okay.
And your allergen comes in and it fits that exact key lock and it turns the lock. And basically what it does is essentially opens the mast cell.
Right.
Now all the contents spill out basically, or the ones that are involved in the allergic response, histamines kick off.
Right.
And all that. That's when you get the symptoms.
Right, and so an antihistamine sort of locks that down and shuts it off. Is that what it's
Yeah, and I didn't get a chance to, that's a good question. Didn't get a chance to look up exactly what it does. I'm not sure if it keeps it from opening the thing or if it binds histamine once it does get released.
Okay.
But, either way. So basically it's just, that's the symptomatic phase. And so, anyway, so that's really the whole thing about what an allergy is and the different phases of it and so forth.
Right. Now, again, this is very important, folks, because here Bill's giving quite a technical, at least for me, description of allergies and how Western science and the Western scientific model understands it. And as we've talked about before, models are models. Even what Bill's describing is a model. It's a very good model. And it's based upon a lot of research, a lot of observation, so it's very, very solid. From the standpoint of the person suffering from an allergy, that's very interesting, but what's more interesting to them is how can the symptoms, which may be unpleasant, be stopped? Because, and again, it's very important to make this, I'm so glad that Bill made this definition, because we're talking about a mistake made by the system. It really is a mistake. When the body is stimulated to produce antibodies,
Right.
then this is the immune system working as it should be working. It's working to protect us.
Right.
Now, those of you that have watched other videos and follow this show know that we have a particular view of the mind and body, which we really see as part of it's almost one and the same. There's a continuum, a mind-body organism. And the subconscious mind, one of its functions is to control the body. So in this sense, following our model, we have some instruction that's coming from the subconscious mind, perhaps stimulated by an exterior response, that is turning on a mechanism at the wrong time. It's kind of got its wires crossed.
Right.
So from our standpoint, that's where we're looking at it from. From the standpoint of Western medicine, they're interested in if there's a chemical way in which they can either change that response or suppress the symptomology by control of that response or control of the histamines that are released. So we're approaching the same problem, but we're coming at it from a different angle.
So, yeah, and one thing that I want to say here is, first of all, it's like we said, it's an abnormal response. And if you think about it, it's an incorrect response because you and I are sitting there. We're both breathing in the same air.
Right.
If I have an allergy, my nose starts running and this and that.
Right.
You have nothing.
Right.
Well, it's not harming you. The pollen's not harming you.
Right.
But my system thinks that it is.
Right.
So it really shouldn't be having that response. There's no good reason because there's no harmful invader.
And that's another good point. And I want to point something out here, folks, which you've probably heard us say on other shows. When people get an allergic reaction, let's say Bill and I will sit and we're exposed to the same potential allergens. I get an allergic reaction, maybe to pollen, a runny nose, or scratchy throat, watering eyes, and Bill doesn't. We are not saying in hypnosis that it's all in my head. I'm just imagining it.
Right.
Those responses are real. They really happen. And one of the things that disturbs me the most sometimes about certain mind-body therapies is they try and tell people that everything's just in their head. They're just imagining everything. And believe me, anybody that suffers from these responses knows that they're absolutely real. And we are not saying that they are not real.
Right.
What we are saying is that they sometimes are subject to the control of the subconscious mind, and we can affect that.
Right.
Okay.
So yeah, and and we want to keep this very factual based because this can be a difficult topic for people to believe in and so forth. And so one of the things is the thing I described is a chemical pathway.
Right.
Okay. And Western medicine says, well, this happens, and then it fits into the key, into the lock, and all that.
Yes.
But the other thing that the doctors also know, and they've seen, and they don't know necessarily why it happens, but they found that emotions can actually affect certain illnesses.
Yes, yes.
And so I myself have a mild amount of eczema, okay? And I went to my dermatologist, and he gave me an ointment for it and so forth. And he gave me a few instructions. One, don't wash your hands in really hot water, things like this. And he said, avoid stress, which at the time I was working in the most stressful job. So I kind of laughed, which was a little rude, but I couldn't help it. It just came out. But you see, now here's a Western medicine person who recognizes and sees that the emotions can affect it.
Absolutely.
So that emotions are involved in the mind.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because from the Western medical standpoint, and again, sometimes we can be a little bit unfair, even on this show, to certain Western medicine concepts, but unfair in the sense that we sometimes give the impression that Western medicine doesn't see any connection between the body and mind, but that's not true. Western medicine does see a connection between body and mind. It's just not always as explicit or treated with the primacy that some other effects are.
Right.
But I remember and folks, if you know people out there that have eczema, it's very frequent that people who suffer from eczema suffer from asthma, and people who are asthmatic suffer from eczema. It's not always the case, but it's surprising how frequently they occur together. And I remember hearing from doctors, regular Western medically trained doctors, or doctors trained in Western medicine, that there is a mind-body connection. That they used to call it, if they were excitable or nervous, their likelihood of an asthmatic attack or an outbreak of under stress of eczema would increase. Now, again, we've talked about this, about how there's a general blanket description, stress produces illness, which again for us is a little bit vague. We like to be a bit more specific than that. But the important thing to recognise is there is a mind-body connection. There is something happening.
Right.
And Western medicine recognises it. It tries to deal with and ameliorate the symptoms by the use of creams or medication. But it will also, a doctor will come out and say, hey, try and reduce your level of stress. It will reduce the incidence of eczema.
Which is like telling somebody who's very anxious, relax, just relax, And that's why I say I laughed when he said it, because I couldn't really affect my work situation much other than quit. But and eczema is one example, and you mentioned another, and it's really true. People can have life-threatening asthma attacks based upon some emotional circumstance that happens. It can be very dangerous.
Absolutely.
So if you think about it on just a purely logical level, if you can reduce the emotional driver, then you reduce the response.
Or if you can eliminate the cause of the emotional driver, you can eliminate the response.
Right. And one of the things. So the interesting thing is one of our famous hypnotists, Dave Ellman, he did a lot of work with allergies and so forth. And he found that he could eliminate hay fever, like you said, completely, and so forth. And we'll talk more about what that's all about and so forth. But the funny thing from a technical standpoint is you might still have the antibodies produced. You just don't have the symptoms. Why exactly? I couldn't tell you. There's no evidence or no explanation of why. But they have found that you'll still have the antibodies. Well, why don't you have the symptoms?
Right, and this comes back, sometimes in specific cases, and we're going to talk more in a second about specific cases, but sometimes I work with people with allergies, and I work with them, and the allergic response is completely eliminated. But to confirm it, what they'll do is they'll go along to an allergist and they'll give them skin pricks and they'll go, oh yeah, you're still allergic to these things, right?
Right.
And so they'll come back to me and they'll say, well, but the allergist tells me I'm still allergic, how come? And I ask a question, do you get the response? And they say, well, no. And this, I think, provides a very good scientific explanation, but without that, the client gets upset because it appears that the allergist and I, are telling them two entirely different things.
Right.
I'm saying, no, you've got no allergy. See, you don't respond. And the allergist's going, oh, yes, you have. Look, the test shows it. It proves it.
Right.
And the strange thing is, we can both be correct.
Right.
That's the strange thing. Of course, when people think about an allergy, they don't tend to think about the production of antibodies. They tend to think about the symptomatic response. Most of us don't really sit down and think, boy, I wonder what antibodies I've got here today, this morning, as we're drinking our coffee.
Right.
What we are concerned about is if we have a response to that coffee, or a response to some food, or a response to something else.
And the thing about it is, if you think about this, it's not any different. So let's say I have hay fever.
Yes.
And the allergist does the pinprick, says, yeah, you've got an allergy. Okay,
Right.
you've got antibodies being produced and so forth. And I got the symptoms.
Right.
Now, he says, take this antihistamine.
Right.
Okay, I take it and all the symptoms go away.
Right.
Do I still have an allergy? Yes.
Right.
For some reason, that antihistamine blocks the histamine response in whatever mechanical way it does.
Right.
So it's the same thing we're talking with hypnosis. We can't necessarily say exactly what it's doing, but somehow you still may have the allergy, but you're not getting the response.
Right, and it struck me just a little wicked thought came to my head, which that it would be very interesting scientifically to see if there'd been any change in the antibodies as a result of the work that we did. But this is a kind of a curiosity for us. It really doesn't affect you or people that that suffer from things. You just want relief from that symptomatic response. And the potential and promise of hypnosis in that is it may work where other things don't, or it may work in a very, very gentle fashion and eliminate the need for drugs or medication. And just before we talk, we've been talking just a lot about things like hay fevers and antihistamines, but frankly, Bill, most people that come to me for allergies, that's not what they really come for.
Okay.
Most people that come to me for allergies these days are coming because of either what I would call, environmental allergies, but they're very severe. But a lot of things are food allergies.
That's what I was going to ask you. I know in the past you've worked with food allergies. Have you worked with nut allergies, or has it been other types of things? You had a really powerful case, didn't you, where a person had a lot of allergies to food, or not really thinking of a fellow?
Yes. Well, there's several cases where people have had multiple allergies. The strange thing is in that particular case, I wasn't working with them on allergies. I didn't even know they had allergies. I had no idea. They only told me afterwards, and then they said as a curiosity, I don't seem to be having the same allergic responses. We were working on something entirely different. And this to me was very, very curious because one of the things that we find in hypnosis, of course, is that we work on one thing and something else changes. But again, from the point of view of our model, this isn't surprising because if things are an emotional response to particular events and stimuli, and those emotions are trapped inside, then when we work on those, other responses clear up. So this isn't a complete surprise. But I was struck by the extent of that. But
and it is pretty surprising. As you know, I came to you for a particular problem, had nothing to do with phobias or anything like that. And I've had for years claustrophobia.
Right.
And you worked with me on the other issue, and the funny part is my claustrophobia lightened way, way, way up.
Right.
You know, and in the end, it didn't eliminate it completely, but you weren't working on that specific thing. And then recently, I went back in doing self-hypnosis, did a lot of work on it, and then you helped me with one final session and eliminated it.
Right. So food allergies. I mean, so so things work on different ways.
They hit different ways. So talk about a case that you had.
Well, I mean, one of the ones, and I think I can't remember if I've mentioned this on the show before. I might have done, but a while ago I was working with a young person. At the time I worked with him, he was 12 years old, and he had developed a very serious allergy to eggs.
Right.
And when I say a serious allergy, when he would eat an egg or anything containing even traces of egg, it appeared, what would happen is his throat would swell and it would start to close and he would have serious difficulties breathing. And it naturally, of course, scared the parents so much that they called emergency services. And on 2 occasions he'd been taken to hospital because they were trying to, they thought he was going to stop breathing.
Right.
So very, 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 very scary for the parents. And they were completely sceptical that I could have any any effect on it, and so was the young chap.
And let me ask you this: obviously, he'd probably been to an asthma specialist and everything. And do you remember what had been done to date about it?
He had been given. I don't think at this time he'd been given an inhaler.
Okay.
He had just been told that to avoid eggs or any egg substances, and of course. This can be quite difficult because egg substances or traces of eggs can be in many, many things. They can just be around.
Right.
And so I started off asking, the severity of this allergy for this particular person, this little boy, had only really happened within the last 2 years.
Okay.
Up until that point, he'd been eating eggs. And I asked him, do you like eggs? Because maybe he just didn't like them.
Right.
And he said he did. He liked eggs in all sorts of different forms. He was quite happy to eat fried eggs and hard-boiled eggs and soft-boiled eggs and all manner of eggs. And he said that one of his sadnesses was that he couldn't eat eggs anymore. He was very sad about that. And because when it comes to most food allergies, apart from any medication that people are given, what they're basically advised is you avoid it.
Right.
The problem seems to be that very frequently the allergic response seems to expand to more and more foods. But anyway, this was an allergy to something else.
This was in his specific case, or has this been seen by doctors that?
It seems to expand it's been seen by doctors, I'm sure, and it was certainly the case. Now, the reason that we spoke with eggs is he had a number of allergies to different foods and other substances. Including allergies to wool, which affected his skin.
Wow.
There were a number of things. And again, I really want to emphasise that the parents were extremely sceptical. The only reason they came to me is because of a recommendation by his grandmother, who I'd worked with and things, and otherwise they probably wouldn't have even seen me.
Right.
And I asked what was the latest allergy that had developed, and it was eggs. So I asked...
The latest time-wise?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And I asked them if we would have permission to do that, to work on that, and we had agreement with the boy. Anyway, it involved a couple of sessions, but the shorthand, the abbreviated version is simply this. On regression, we got back to... And regression for allergies is quite difficult. Sometimes, not always.
And explain, for a first-time viewer, explain regression. You're taking
them
back
regression,
to an
we're taking
time.
them back. The idea behind regression is that